Good morning, everyone. So this presentation is 1 hour today, and we're just going to be talking about wellness, and it is designed for the peer who often engages with tough cases. Building resilience can be a way to safeguard from compassion fatigue. Okay, so let's take a minute and just take in this picture. I'm going to imagine it's Mount Rainier, but it could be any mountain. We have a wonderful view of it here in Tacoma. But I just want to give you a little bit of what's coming in this hour. By supporting tomorrow's work, you begin to build a wellness practice that tracks for individual needs. As a peer support, let me explain. What I want to do is step back a minute and look at this mountain together. And we discuss briefly the topics that we're going to be looking closer at today. One of them is there are 5 skills that I have recently kind of put in a space in my mind as, wow, this would really help me be checking myself and making sure that I'm successful. So we're going to talk a little bit about those 5 skills. I think they're critical to have developed in your toolkit. I want to take a minute and imagine that you're a plumber or a construction worker. And if you had to go on your job site, you would not go into that place unless you had the tools necessary to do the job that you were ready to perform. And so, in that vein of thought, I want to talk about tools in that way. And these 5 skills to me represent tools. And I feel like if we can understand what they are, we will learn to keep them close to our grasp. And a little analogy for us women would be keep it in your pocketbook. Make sure it's with you, that you have it nearby and that you can use it. And so I'm going to try to talk a little bit about those practical ways. And I wanted to ask everyone if we could take a minute and look around your room, see if you can find some paper. It doesn't have to be a big piece, but it could be a big piece. But a paper and a pen or a pencil is something that's going to be really nice and useful for you. So one of the things that I like to encourage is that we're going to kind of keep track for ourselves, right? So it doesn't have to be a legalistic, I have to take care of myself. I need to do this. I need to make sure. No, we're just going to be record keepers. And so today we're going to do a little practice with that. Since we already wrote down one hobby, or we already communicated one hobby with one another, I would like to ask everyone to get their piece of paper and put number 1 through 6. So number 1, underneath number 1, put number 2, like this. So yeah, so write number 1 and then number 2, number 3, and do it all the way to 6. Number 4, number 5, number 6. So the first one you're going to write, number 1, is the hobby that you shared with us today. So I put hiking or walking. I'll write it down. And then I would like you to write another one that you use, another hobby that is near to your heart that you find yourself utilizing. And I'm going to share what mine is. It's singing. I like to sing. Sometimes when I walk, I sing. So I get to do 2 at the same time. And then the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is write 2 more hobbies that you're thinking about doing. You haven't necessarily engaged in it, or you tried it once and thought it was fun, but didn't really go back to it. Or you've just never done it, but you've always thought, I wonder if I would be good at that or if I would enjoy it. So go ahead and write those down. And just to let you know, it's okay to write more than one. Sometimes when we connect with an idea, we go, oh yeah, well, there's another one too. And so feel free, fill this thing up, fill it up. And so the last two that I'm asking for you to do are two hobbies that you've seen other people do and it looks interesting. So here I'll give you an example. When I was growing up in high school and college, I I just admired people that were artists. I really loved it. And I thought they were God's gift to the world. Every single person that could do art, I just was so amazed by them. And so if there's someone that does something that is could be construed as a hobby, or even if it's their livelihood, but you admire it, go ahead and write those down for 5 and 6. Okay. So the next thing that I just want to continue to share with you about what's coming is we're going to talk a little bit about debriefs. What is a debrief? Does anyone utilize them with their own family or coworker team? So in the sort of where we're going with all of this part, at the bottom on my screen with the mountain, it says practice. And I just wanted to let you know that there's a great deal of value in experiential practice. We will be putting some effort today in, depending on the time that we have at the end. But depending on the constraints, we'll try to engage some in some of these things that we're talking about, simply because it's really a good way for it to absorb in your brain. And it also is a way of understanding the relevance to it. Okay, so let's start with our overview. Basically, we have already written down and can see the variety that hobbies offer. We've engaged with that a little today. There's a lot out there, and that's good. I think for me, it helps me stand in my value, which is really something that I feel like I have to keep doing every day. And so if I take care of myself and I do self-care things, then I am telling myself, Camella, you have value. And so it's like a reminder of standing in that. So we all know that resilience fortifies us. And I'm here to show today how consciously it can become a place that keeps us out of harm's way. And in this line of work that we do as peers, harm's way could be something that looks like burnout. It could be something that looks like compassion fatigue. I kind of want to give a little analogy to that. I don't know if anyone's heard of the term the frog in the beaker. So it's a story where they're doing an experiment and there's a frog sitting in a beaker of water. And if they put the frog in water that is just regular room temperature, and then they set the beaker on a Bunsen burner and they actually start to heat the water up, the water heats up very gradually, but eventually it will boil. And once it reaches a boiling point, it will kill the frog. And the frog isn't aware that it's happening. So they don't do anything. And it is because it's gradual and it is because it's unseen. And to me, that is an analogy of what can happen when we're constantly acting out in trauma informed spaces as a peer. We can over time not realize the toll that it might be taking on us. Incidentally, if you put a frog in boiling water, they'll jump right out just that fast. So they'll save themselves. And I guess I feel like these tools that I'm going to be sharing really are about trying to recognize that I'm doing a work that could be potentially hazardous. It is like a fireman or a policeman, but it's emotional work. And so it is something that can creep up on you. And it's very important. It's fully capable of taking us down without our awareness. And so developing best practice in our line of work is really an essential protection. Okay, so moving on to the next So this is the 5 famous. I've kind of like been sort of skirting around it and talking about it, but this is just it, straight and narrow. The first one is hobbies, and we're just going to be talking about engaging in hobbies. The second one is making a habit to check in with yourself. And anyone you have a healthy conflict with, like I'm not going to say you should always check in with someone when you're in unhealthy conflict. So it's really you to gauge, but the habit of checking in with yourself and with others is a very good practice. We've talked a lot, and everyone has talked, even in grade school, about journaling. So morning pages is a form of journaling that I'm going to share today with a little twist, something I got from Julia Cameron, who does workshops. And she wrote a book called The Artist's Way. In fact, I have a copy of it and a link I can share and send to anyone who would like. But and then another one is pose. So we're going to talk a little bit about physical hobbies and the what they do for us mentally, but there are some key things that we can learn about the mindset and the way that our body responds to cortisol, and it's kind of like a reducing cortisol hack. So just something that we're going to talk about. And then debriefs. We didn't really go into it too much, so I'm just going to give a definition. It can be very basic. It can just be a check-in with a group. But if it's something that you did, like say you went on a call and it was really intense and you can't find anyone to do a debrief with, you can do a debrief with yourself. It's a little more thorough than a check-in because it asks some basic questions like, what went well? What was a challenge? And what can I do different? So it's just a little more thorough way of investigating. Okay. All right. So I'm going to show you something that I use because it's really important to me not to be legalistic, and because November is on its way. All I'm doing is taking a record. I'm tracking my week. So I'm going to be writing down some things that happened for me. And that way I can look back and do some reflection within that week and say, oh, tomorrow when I decide to do some self-care, what can I do that will sort of well round the circumstance? Okay. So again, we don't have to be legalistic about our self-care. We're just taking a little note. It's easy to do. I went on a walk, write it down. Okay. And then more thorough, and this is a description of the hobbies that we've started talking about already. From a therapy session that I got in for EAP, it was recommended that I do 6 different hobbies a week. Whew, that's a lot. And even thinking about it overwhelmed me. But the caveat to this is it's only 20 minutes for each hobby. So if you do the math on that, it's really not too much time that you can devote to your self-care. But it's important to recognize what the different kinds of hobbies are that your body might need. And physical hobby is one. An example for that would be going for a walk, doing a power pose. I'm going to read off like going swimming, basically the concept of move energy around. Okay. And then the other one is emotional. I notice when I do my tracking that sometimes I don't do enough emotional. So I like go, oh, I did all the physical. There's a bunch of blue here, where I wrote down I went for a walk and I did this, but I don't necessarily do the things that are emotional. And so sometimes I need to take more time to check on myself and say, oh, Camella, did you sing today? Or did you talk about your feelings or write something out? And then another one is mental. So the best way to explain mental is it's kind of something mindless that clears your head by something that you're not doing currently. And it's important to understand why these 3 are here and So I'm going to take just a second to talk about that. And one of the things is physical moves the energy around, and that's important. But if you don't have the emotional part where you're connecting to it and expressing it, it's still deep inside your body. So the emotional part is important to kind of help it surface, get the senses to surface what's going on. Then the physical can help get rid of it. And the mental, can be something as simple as lying on the grass outside, maybe not right now during the weather, but listening to live music, listening to bird song or a recording of bird song, doing some origami, reading. I think that was one of the hobbies that was listed. These are things that it's like a mindset of moving yourself out of the environment. So if you've been working in trauma informed care, you will often find that you get very engaged. That's part of it, to get engaged. But in order to stay safe and well, you need to find a hobby that you can do just for 20 minutes that will help you disengage from that, so that you're just getting the practice of going, okay, I was there, now I'm not there. I'm going to do a practice that reminds my body and reminds myself that I'm not there and I can do something else. Okay. So let's talk more about the debrief. I think that the best thing to remember is just keep it simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated to do a debrief. One of the things that the best place that I learned it was when I was a Montessori teacher for middle school. And at the end of the day, we had this circle, and we had, so imagine all these like 12-year-olds all getting in a circle together and going around the room. And we would all say what went well, and we just go around the room. What went well? What went well? Every single person. And then what was a challenge? And then what could I do different? And the important part about this kind of conversation with people that you work with, or if you can't find someone after a call and you have to go on a walk and say, okay, Camella, it's time to do my own debrief with myself about that call. What went well? What was a challenge? What could I do different? And I like actually say it out loud. If I can't find a warm body, I become that counselor for my own person. And it's so critical because authenticity and transparency is how we heal. It's how we move through a challenge. And when we allow ourselves to move through a challenge with other people and practice authenticity and sort of check the box, what went well? What was a challenge? What could I do differently? We are exercising transparency and manifesting authenticity in our space. It's very, very powerful. So now that we have our 6 items that we wrote, let's take a minute and right next to it, decide that hobby that I listed, is it physical? Is it emotional? Or is it mental? And if you need me to reread the definition or give some more examples, I can do that. So now that we have them all categorized, the 6 that we know we've done a little exercise to ask ourselves, where do I need to fill in? Do I have 2 of each? Can I start doing one of these that I've imagined someone else doing? When you do the charting, I noticed that it helps to use color. So I use blue for physical, red for emotional, and then purple is mental. So it's up to you what colors you want to use. But when I do my charting for the week, and I've done something like I played solitaire, and I wrote it in purple because that was a 20-minute exercise. I did a few different games of it, but it really helped me move my mind to somewhere else. And so that is just a way of interacting with that. So the other thing is, because I found, and I think we are in a society where emotional release is not something that we practice daily. I grew up in a family where I didn't even know how to feel or learn about feelings. So I had to go to like a 6-day workshop to learn. And I will say it took a lot of practice even after that. So one of the things that I found is if I can do a feelings and needs check-in, it really supports my emotional box. So if I'm missing an emotional box and I haven't cried all week, I like, okay, or even if I have a conflict with someone, like if I've had a conflict with someone and I don't know how to resolve it, I can try to just check in with myself. And I try to make it as simple as possible. I've written cards so that like they they can be something easy that I pick out. I use like a feelings wheel chart, and then I just write down all the different feelings and use blank paper. And so maybe I'm feeling furious today. So I go ahead and connect to that and say it out loud. What I usually do will even be write it on a piece of paper. I feel furious. And then maybe I'll take a red pen and crayon and just start drawing with it. But I just take a moment to acknowledge that I feel and what I feel. And then there's also a needs wheel, just like the feelings wheel. And so maybe I need rest. So I try to check in. I feel something and I need something. And today, right now, we're going to do that. So you have paper. On one side of the paper, write a feeling word. And on the other, write a need word. I wrote that I feel anxious and I need hope. So the other part to this check in that I practice is if I've taken the time to acknowledge my feeling, and then I've taken the time to connect to and acknowledge my need. I know that the universe is out there and quite possibly will participate with me more than I will. But I try to think of something little that I can do to just say, hey, universe, I'm willing to receive what you have for me. And I try to make it actionable. And it doesn't have to be a huge action. But in this case, for me, I'm going to say my action is going to be I choose to breathe. So I'm just going to do it right here with you to sort of practice. And then if you feel comfortable, it could be as simple as getting up and getting a glass of water. Um, or even deciding to call and make an appointment for a massage or any kind of thing that you think is your part. There may not be anyone available on the other line. You may be leaving a message, but you are making an active choice to do something just a little different to participate in acknowledging your feeling and acknowledging your need. It's really a practice of standing in your value. So I'm going to choose to breathe. So I'm just going to take a minute. The other thing that I wanted to do is talk about pose. That is a physical thing that we can do. We're not going to practice it right now just because the logistics of moving the computer and standing up might be a little difficult. But there's a lady named Amy Cuddy who does a TED Talk, and she has several out there. And I just found this little clip. But she wrote a book and she talks about an accident that she was in when she was young that put her in the hospital for months. Like I think she could have died and might have. But she healed. And she later ended up going to college, MIT, and becoming a neuroscientist. And one of the things that she studied was how the brain heals. And it was kind of neat how her story can impact us to understand that we don't understand or know why things happen to us, but we are given skill within that circumstance to move past it. And so, one of the little hacks that she has researched and found out is that if you stand up for 2 to 3 minutes and take on Superman pose or Wonder Woman pose. Basically, it's called a power pose, but it's not intended to be over authoritative. It's just standing in your value. And so taking on that posture reduces cortisol. So 2 to 3 minutes, standing in that way can be a physical practice. And I don't know if it'd be easy to do for 20 minutes, but I think it could be one of several things. I know yoga is definitely a physical thing that can be one of the ways to create a hobby. And power pose is one of the shapes that you can do. So something nice to know. One of the things that I really want to underline before we go, because we're getting close to the end, and I know we could take it all the way to the end, but I like to let it out just a little early and know that we didn't push the time frame too much. But I want to ask the question, and nobody, this is rhetoric. No one needs to answer, but but I want to ask the question: am I in therapy? Am I regularly getting support for my own mental wellness? And the only reason that I bring it up is in order for someone to get a licensed clinician certification, they usually have to go through about 1,000 hours of therapy. And it coincides with their training, but it's sort of a little separate too, because it's basically the idea of doing your own work. And I feel like when we go into trauma informed situations and we want to be a trauma informed peer, it surfaces things sometimes that are similar to something that we went through or that could remind us of something that we went through. And so we just want to be checking with ourselves. Are we making sure that we have enough support to manage and process? Okay, so that was just one quick thing. And then when we talked about these 5 skills, I recommend after every call to consider doing a debrief. And the reason is just like soap scum in the shower, if we are not careful to understand that we are human and it's okay to have a conversation with ourselves about a debrief of what happened, what went well, what could I do different. Basically, we help ourselves not bring it home. So we might have been exposed to a little drama, and it sort of keeps us from taking the drama home, but it also invites growth in the process, and it's communication with ourselves and others and supports resilient living. So I'm going to put the reference slide up, but The Artist's Way is a book that Julia Cameron wrote, and she does morning pages. And morning pages are just like journaling, but I've added a little twist to it. Let's see if I can find a piece of paper. I get 3 loose leaf sheets of paper and I write them out. And it's stream of conscious. You just write whatever comes to your mind. I feel, I think, whatever's going on. And then I rip them up. And that's my way of saying I don't have to worry about the judger that's on my shoulder telling me I'm not allowed to think or feel that. But I'm literally giving myself this practice. And then another little twist that I add to it is I take another piece of paper and I fold it long ways and I set it next to me. And I put the word to be on one side, and then I put the word to do on the other. And I look at the universe, that's the doer. That's the universe's job to make that happen. My job is to be. And so I just jot down the things that come to my mind, because sometimes when we journal, that's what happens. Like we just start thinking about, oh, I need to go do this or I need to go do that. So we just write it all down and say, okay, universe, you can do that. And then on the other side, if something comes up like, oh, I could go for a walk in the woods right now, like that actually might be fun. Okay, go ahead and write that down and then just keep doing your journaling, to be, to feel. And then when you're done, it takes about 15 minutes to get 3 pages filled, and then just rip it up and throw it away after you're done with that morning page. So that is that reference, and that can definitely count for an emotional hobby. And then we talked about the Blue Angels and their debrief method. We talked about Amy Cuddy and the power pose. And then I got the 3 different hobbies idea from Develop Mind Therapies. That's the place where I used my EAP to get some therapy. And then So that therapist was really good at coming up with those ideas. So I wanted to give them credit for it. And then at the bottom, some of these ideas I've also developed in my my work as a business owner in a company that I started a few years back called Soaring Dragonfly Institute, where we do workshops and we have Montessori um, education combined, and we invite adults to pretend like they're 3 and visit their inner child. So those are the references. Thank you all. Talk to you soon.